The Headless Valley, a forsaken national park where otherworldly creatures roam. Bound within its confines are headless men, doomed to eternal suffering, while an oppressive aura of foreboding saturates the air. Its tainted past drips with enigma and malice, revealing dreadful revelations of missing girls and the ghastly remnants of decapitated abominations. Brace yourself, for this video reveals the unspeakable truth behind why this malevolent sanctuary should be the last place on your mind for a vacation. For hundreds of years, people have always believed that there is something beyond human understanding sneaking through the forests and mountains in the Nahanni Valley. And though this may seem like some weird, cooked-up conspiracies, the several mysterious deaths and disappearances in this region over the years seem to say otherwise. In fact, there's a good reason why this place is called the Headless Valley, and also dreaded even by the locals. It's all because of the horrifying real-life events and stories that occurred here, some of which even involve decapitation. One of the most unsettling events in the Headless Valley is that of a missing girl named Lafferty. The little girl and her family had come to spend some refreshing time with nature in the Nahanni Valley during the summer of 1921. Everything was going well until the girl started feeling homesick, longing for her home. And then, one day, she suddenly vanished. At first, everyone thought she had gone sightseeing or was probably using the bathroom. But panic began to grow amongst her people when she failed to show up for dinner later that day. In no time, they gathered 5 solid men, hunters who knew their way around the valley and could track animals efficiently. It wasn't long after they set out that these men found the trail of Lafferty. It turned out that she had wandered off toward the forest. But there was something off about everything. The grounds these men covered and the speed with which they tracked meant that the girl had traveled with speed and agility through the steep landscape. Was she running? If so, why? Her footprint wasn't all over the place like someone who was lost. They seemed like someone traveling fast to a known location. Was someone calling her, or was she simply running away from something? The confusion and mystery became even deeper when the search party, now 9 days into the search, began to discover bits of Lafferty's tattered clothing draped on the branches. They found several of these, and it just didn't make sense. The forest here in Nahanni Valley is treacherous from mosquito to weird insects in the cold. Anything could kill a grown man, much less a little girl. The mind-boggling search finally came to a dead end when the footprints stopped at the foot of a rugged mountain. These cliffs were so terrifying that the pro hunters couldn't dare to risk climbing. But it seemed like this girl made the climb because the hunters picked up her track on top of the mountain, heading in an unknown direction. No one could figure out how a girl with no superpowers could climb a 5,000-foot mountain. They called off the search. By this point, the men knew they were way in over their heads, and something else was at play here. Lafferty was left for dead. However, till today, her remains have never been found. You may not understand the mystery in this story until you see or venture into the Nahanni in person. There are no access roads to this vast wilderness. The only way here is by plane, boat, or backbreaking hiking. Also, no tourist accommodations or conducive settlements, even up till today. It's a place only hunters, hardcore hikers, and perhaps jungle folks like Tarzan would survive here for 9 days as Lafferty did. Over the last 10,000 years, the few tribes who have attempted to settle in this region have disappeared suddenly. One worthy mention here is the Nahanni tribe. These guys fled, leaving their homes, food supplies, and everything. Rumors have it that the tribe reported being terrorized by creatures and white demons lurking in the forest. They also mentioned dreadful large wolves called wahilas. But one thing that makes this place irresistible is its natural beauty. It's this beauty that made the victim in our next story pick the Nahanni Valley as his vacation spot, only to meet an unfortunate end much later. The man in this story was a retired war veteran, John OBrien. He had set off into the valley to get some peace and quiet, and so he built a small cabin along the side of the Nahanni River next to another adventurer. John stayed here for about a year until one morning on January 27, 1922, when he set out to check some traps he had set some days earlier. According to the story, John told his neighbor he'd be away for about a week. However, 2 weeks down the line, John still hadn't returned. It was at this point his neighbor became worried and set out to search for him. To no avail. 1 month later, John was still missing. This prompted two old-time comrades of John named Jack Lafferty and Jonas Lafferty to go on a deep search for the war hero. After a long and hard search, they finally found his dead body on a lonely mountain peak right next to his trapline. He was frozen on the spot, holding a large box of matches in his hand. The matches in his hand indicated a failed attempt to start a fire. John was buried right there on the spot, and the site was renamed OBrien's Mountains. Nahanni Valley may be a national park, and it looks quite beautiful from a bird-eye view. But unless you are willing to live in the wild and put up with the strange, eerie sounds and the acclaimed mysterious creatures that always plague this wilderness at midnight, you'd best stay away from this place. Our final story may be perhaps the most spine-chilling of all, and to date has left park authorities scratching their heads. It's the actual story of decapitation that happened right here in the Nahanni Valley. Right before we jump into the last part, if you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Our final story centers around a man named Yukon Fisher. This man had a giant frame with a great deal of physical strength and toughness. He is what you would call a Hulk. He was fond of brawling and never lost a fight. However, after one particularly violent incident, Yukon Fisher became wanted by the authorities, so he fled to the Nahanni wilderness for refuge around the early 1900s. There, he lived as an outlaw. Fisher lived like a nomad, setting up shelters as he went. But he did find one valuable thing in this unforgiving land, though: gold. Fisher would hunt for game and gold, and would occasionally stop by a nearby trading post to exchange some pieces of gold for food and supplies. Much later, a tracker came to inform Yukon Fisher that his days of running were over. His assailant had dropped all charges, and he was no longer a wanted man. However, Fisher was already far gone by this time. He had become a real-life Jaws of the jungle. The wild man chose to turn down the offer and stay in the wilderness. No one ever heard from Fisher after that. And in 1928, when tourists went for an expedition in this wilderness, they found the headless skeleton of a giant white man, the remains of Yukon Fisher. There was no doubt it was the wild gold harvester and hunter, because right next to him was a rifle and a decaying primitive shelter very similar to the kind built by primitive bushmen. But the most shocking thing was that this man's head was decapitated. He lay right next to his rifle, which was bent in half. A simple logical theory would be that whatever attacked him must have first disarmed him by making his gun unusable before taking the big man out. There's no telling what killed Fisher. Perhaps it's the giant grizzly bears that roam this vast landscape, or maybe it is something more sinister and mysterious, like the Wahilas described by the Nahanni tribe. However, Fisher's case is very similar to several others. So many men have been found dead in this valley, with their heads severed from their bodies. Another tale is that of 3 brothers who went gold mining in this region, only to go radio silent for 2 years. Later, when a search party was conducted for them, they found their bodies in their tents, decapitated. One dead body appeared to be reaching for his rifle, and another was completely charred. It was horrifying. Surely, these decapitations can't be mere coincidences. This must be a trademark murder style of a person, creature, beast, or maybe demon. The decapitated corpses found here are one of the main reasons why you don't hear much about this place and why it receives less than 1,000 visitors every year. Everyone knows that if you visit this place, there's no guarantee you'll come back with your head.